So, hello everybody and welcome to this Meniere's disease masterclass. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it is a Saturday, so not everyone wants to be on a webinar. We have quite a lot of content to get through today, so I will skip over some slides, the more technical ones, so we can try and get through most of the content within the hour. We might run over the hour and into question and answer slot at the end. We do have a mixed audience today. It's actually aimed for the general public, but we do have some nutrition practitioners as well as some students today, but it's still going to be aimed at the general public, and I will skip over some of the more technical aspects of it. I'm not going to have time to deal with questions as we go through the talk because there is a lot of content to get through, but if you do have any questions as they arise, do pop them in the chat box. And Shirley, who's monitoring that, will answer what she can. Shirley is also a nutrition practitioner as well as a nutrition teacher as well. So hopefully she'll be able to answer some of your questions. And then at the end, anything that's not been answered, I will come back and answer. So before we actually get started on the talk, I first want to introduce you to John Ingram, who is the founder of the Deaf to Meniere's charity, and he is the reason why we are all here today. So I'm just going to hand over to you, John, for a few words.
Yes, right. So I better set my timer. I've got 3 minutes. I know, except my watch isn't. The clock's not working. So yes, I'm John Ingram from Deaf to Meniere's, and I just wanted to give a little bit of introduction to the journey we've been on to get to this webinar today, really. So I'm a fully fledged paid up member of the Meniere's disease sufferers. I started getting vertigo attacks in 2014. I was going through spells where I was having vertigo attack every day and they would last 5 or 6 hours, but I'm sure most of you on this call know what that feels like. So that was 9 years ago for me. And I got a diagnosis at that time of Meniere's. Meniere's disease, there's nothing we can do. Why don't you try these beta-histine tablets? They might work. But other than that, I've got various draconian surgical solutions you can try, but I didn't fancy any of that. So I went on my own journey, really. I thought, I'm not going to accept this. I'm going to go off and find out what's going on with my body and restore my health. So I went off on a kind of journey of treatment. It took me about 2 years to get the vertigo under control. I think my last vertigo attack was about 2016, but I still felt pretty bad with all the other symptoms you get, head fog, fatigue, etc. Around about 2018, so 4 years later, I had the idea of setting up Deaf to Meniere's. So you can see we've got a website, deaftomenieres.com, where I just use that to record all the information I've come across along my journey to get to better health. So I constantly fight to keep my health in good condition. 2000.
Hello, I'm just going to hear. Did anyone else screen frozen, or was it just mine? Was it just John?
No, mine froze as well.
Okay, yeah. I think it was just John. Okay. Hopefully we can get him back later, but let's get on to the presentation then. So I'm just going to share my screen. Just bear with me one moment. Okay, so I've got quite a few slides to go through today. I'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. Just a little intro about me for those who don't know me. I am a UK registered nutritionist. I qualified in 2011 with the first class honours degree in nutritional medicine. My professional body is BANT and I am registered with CNHC. So I founded my nutrition and lifestyle practice, Boundless Energy, over 6 years ago. But I actually have been working in the industry for around about 12 years, starting off first in the nutrition supplement industry with BioCare. I have lectured for various nutrition colleges. I've written and published a book called The Energy Solution. And I also worked as a functional medicine practitioner, on the Abundant Energy Program, which is where I met John when he was referred to me. And this is how this has all come about today, right from the early start, from when we first met, and all the work that I have subsequently done with John and other Meniere's sufferers. So what is it that I do? So I'm a nutritionist and an energy expert focusing on healthy aging, and I help prevent or reverse chronic conditions so that people can live with energy and vitality. Meniere's disease sits squarely within that bracket. It is a condition that tends to happen kind of around in the midlife. So what I do is I have 4 pillars of health, which I've slightly adjusted this presentation to look at from the immunity perspective, because there's a big immune element. So it's looking at food. Food is your fuel. It's the nutrients that fuel every aspect of your body, but it also fuels your immune system as well, so that it works properly. Looking at the environment, we also have to look at that. This affects the terrain of your body. So environmental stressors, these can be bacteria, viruses, mold. It can be heavy metals. It can be other kind of external stressors. These are all going to activate your immune defenses. And again, as we go through the presentation, you'll see that aspect. And then lifestyle. How are you living your life? How are you moving, or are you moving? How your body functions, your musculoskeletal, your biomechanics, all these play into causing stress in your body. And then there's your mindset as well, which is your engine. How do you think? What are your emotions? What are all these thoughts, repeated thoughts that you happen, because they all drive the stress response and cause a physiological response in your body. And again, stress is a big part of this condition. So we'll be looking at those during today. So this is what we're going to look at today. I'm briefly going to define Meniere's. What is it? We'll have a quick look at ear anatomy and pathophysiology. Then we'll go into the multiple potential causes. We're going to look at the case history of Francis. So Francis we did last year, and it was a trial that I did in conjunction with Deaf to Meniere's, who funded the trial. We got great success with Francis. So I'm going to go through what we did with Francis and how I was able to help her. And then I'm going to give some basic, simple recommendations that you can introduce now to help yourself if you've got this condition. So what actually is Meniere's? Well, it's a disorder of the inner ear that affects balance and hearing. The main symptoms are vertigo and an extreme type of dizziness, tinnitus, roaring or ringing in the ears, a sense of fullness or pressure in the ears, and then fluctuations of hearing or actual hearing loss in one or both of those ears. Other symptoms can be nausea, vomiting, and vestibular migraines, so slightly different from regular migraines in that they are emanating from this ear area. So the duration of a symptom can persist for 1 to 2 days after an episode. Tiredness or fatigue is a big part after the attack. The life quality, there's a severe disruption for many people to normal daily activities. It can cause a lot of distress for many people, big effects on mental health with all the symptoms, particularly if you've got that constant ringing in your ears or that feeling of floaty boat sensation that's going on. Similar symptoms could be migraines, ear infections, and also labyrinthitis. So the prevalence is about approximately 0.3% of the population have this condition. It's more common in European descent and more prevalent in females with an approximate ratio of 4:1. There's no association per se, although a small percentage is found to run in families, but there are likely to be other genetics at play, and we're going to look at a little bit of genetics a little bit further on. It usually happens around about the mid-years and 40s or 50s, but it can happen before or after. The episode timings are unpredictable, and the duration of minutes or hours, most common is 2 to 3 hours. It can be cluster symptoms within a short period, followed by months or years without symptoms. Typically, it begins in one ear, although it may affect both ears for about 35% of sufferers. And permanent hearing may actually happen or develop for many. The prognosis currently, there's no recognised cure, just management. So let's look at the medical management. It is really about symptom treatment and providing support. So often medicines can be taken at the first sign of symptoms, such as prochlorperazine, which helps relieve nausea and vomiting. Antihistamines such as beta histine, this is a one that's quite often prescribed for nausea, vomiting, vertigo. But there may be other treatments well needed for tinnitus and hearing loss, or for vertigo, loss of balance as well. Surgery involves decompression of the endolymphatic sac. That is part of the inner ear anatomy that actually regulates the fluid inside of the ear and has an immune element to it. And we'll look at that in the anatomy and physiology part. Or there could be removal of the actual inner ear structures themselves. Counselling may be involved, such as cognitive behavioural therapy and relaxation therapy, including breathing techniques and yoga. They can be really, really helpful because there is a big stress response involved. And often there could be referral to support groups and organisations, such as the Deaf to Meniere Society. So I just want to touch on the ear anatomy because I want to set the scene for what happens or what might be happening to you, so you have a little bit of an understanding. So there, the ear consists of 3 parts. Just looking at this diagram here, it's conveniently coloured. So the outer ear is in green, shown here on the left-hand side of the diagram. The middle ear is in purple, and then you've got the inner here on the right-hand side of the diagram, which is orange. And this is the part that is actually affected in Meniere's disease. And with the inner ear, there are 2 main functions, and they are hearing and balance. So I just want to look at the key areas in the inner ear. So you have, again, on the diagram here in the yellow, on the right-hand side, the yellow side, you've got the cochlea, which is the auditory centre. Then you've got here in the blue, the semicircular canals, which sit at right angles to each other. They sense balance and posture. In the middle, you have the green area, which is the vestibule, consisting of the sacral and the utricle, also helping with balance equilibrium. And then here in the red is the endolymphatic duct, or the endolymphatic sac. This drains or regulates fluid from the cochlea and the semicircular canals, and it has an immune element. So this plays a big part in the whole picture, which we'll look at a little bit more further down the line. So the parts of the inner ear are attached, but they do work separately to each other. I want to just you to look at the inner fluid ducts because they are really relevant to what is happening. You've got 2 ear fluid compartments inside of the inner ear. And again, looking at the diagram on the right-hand side, if you see the blue in the center, this is your inner fluid, and that's called your endolymph. Then outside it or around it, you can see this white area. That's another fluid compartment, which is called the perilymph. And that actually produces the endolymph, the inner fluid. And the membranes between them that separate the 2 fluid compartments. Now, there's a slightly different composition to each fluid compartment. In the inner area, the endolymph, you've got high potassium ions and a low sodium. And then in the outer compartment, you have more low potassium and high sodium. And high potassium is very much needed for electrical stimulus of the nerves to produce sound. Then you've got the nerves, the vestibular nerve and the auditory nerve. And what you have with the endolymphatic fluid, when you move your head around, the fluid moves, and that actually generates a mechanical vibration. And that then results in transmission of an electrical nerve impulse to the brain, which translates into sound frequencies. Just going to skip over this one, which you can read when you have a bit more time. But I want to focus in a little bit on the perilymph fluid. That's the outer fluid, because it does serve as a connection with the cerebrospinal fluid. This is the fluid that bathes your skeleton and your brain. Now, the perilymph regulation is actually regulated by this cerebrospinal fluid. And what happens is that any pressure changes in the cerebrospinal fluid affects the water flux into the perilymph. So if you've got changes in the spinal fluid, it affects the perilymph, which then affects what's going on in the inner ear, in the inner fluid compartment, which is where you have electrical firing of your sound signals. Now, the pressure regulation for the spinal fluid is actually via your blood pressure and your electrolyte levels. This is your sodium, your potassium, magnesium. What electrolytes are just minerals that when they dissolve in water, they carry an electrical charge. So you have a big electrical component to your body. Now, this regulation via the blood pressure, you can see there is a cardiovascular element to it. And when we look at some of the potential causes, you will see that there's this issue with the cardiovascular system as well. The endolymphatic sac, it does drain the fluid from the cochlea and the semicircular canals. And as you'll see, there's going to be a fluid buildup with Meniere's disease. It's the main site of immune activity of the inner ear. So it can generate an immune response. It also inactivates and removes viruses. And we're going to see certain type of pathogens and the effect that they do have in this condition. I'm just going to skip over the path of sound of hearing and balance, which you can look at in your own time. And I've put in some great video animations of the inner ear. I won't be playing these, but you can play this once you get the slides, because I think it's quite good to have a really good visual representation of what is happening in the inner ear so you can understand what might be happening to you. So a quick look at the pathophysiology. It's an syndrome of endolymphatic hydrops, which essentially means an excessive fluid buildup of the endolymph fluid. So that's the inner fluid. The inner fluid is where the electrical signals are going to happen for the sound and the balance. So during a Meniere's attack, there is this fluid buildup, and it causes a progressive distension of the ducts. Now, this pressure fluctuation can actually damage the membranes of the ear, and you can get a temporary leak in the delicate membranes that separate the perilymph and the endolymph, so the inner fluid and the outer fluid. Now, what happens, those fluid compositions of each of those compartments are different. When the membrane leaks, you get a mixture of the two different compartments. The sodium, high sodium of the perilymph mixes with the high potassium of the endolymph. This causes a temporary electrical blockade, and it disrupts the electrical signals to the brain, causing a loss of sensory function. So this mixing of the electrical capacity is causing this blockade. The degree of fluid buildup correlates with the degree of hearing loss. So you can get this membrane rupture as well. It does heal, and this is something that you'll find those of you who do suffer from this condition. When the membrane ruptures, this is when you're really going to get some of these symptoms, and the symptoms can last for some time until the membrane can heal and they can re-establish an equilibrium of those two different fluid compartments. The hearing and balance sensory cells can suffer both a reversible and an irreversible intoxication. And with each successive attack, injury to the inner ear can accumulate. And this is a diagram that just shows on the right-hand side here, you can see the fluid once the membrane has ruptured, you can see the fluid buildup that can happen. And this pressure problem is thought to increase in the hours or the days before the inner ear actually ruptures. So moving on to potential causes, this was a great 2017 review paper I found on multiple studies, which gave a good overview of what might be happening. And we're going to delve into this into a little bit more in the subsequent slides. So aside from the top left-hand side here, inner ear pressure regulation failure, so something's going on with the pressure. Hemodynamic disequilibrium, that means blood flow disruption. Allergy and autoimmunity plays a big part. Down here in the middle line, genetic predisposition. There's definitely some genes at play, but there's no gene as such that's yet been found for Meniere's per se. Hormonal mechanisms, definitely stress mechanisms and water balance hormone issues at play. Disruption of the endolymph secretion. So remember, it's the perilymph that actually secretes the endolymph, and the perilymph is depending on what's going on around that spinal fluid. and decreased endolymph clearance, that's in the endolymphatic sac, and then you've got this membrane rupture. So breaking that down then, we're going to look at these in turn in a little bit more detail. The reason for the inner compartment swelling is not definitively known, but it does appear to be multifactorial. And this is what happens with any chronic disease. It's never just one thing. There are usually multiple things. And it may be different for one person to another. Just because you have the same named health condition, it doesn't mean that you have arrived at it in the same way. For one person, there may be more of X, for another person, there may be more of Y. So some of the things that we're going to look at, trauma to the inner ear, I'm going to skip over, but we're going to look at dysfunctional blood flow. We're going to look at ion transport dysfunction. This sodium potassium ion balance, this is big, and you're going to see this theme throughout this talk. Ear pressure regulation, stress hormonal connection, allergies and sensitivities, both food and environmental, have been found. Immune dysfunction, inflammation, autoimmunity, viruses, bacteria, mold, how they play into it. Heavy metals as a picture, oral health is a big picture which we look at, genetics, and also nutrient deficiencies or imbalances. So looking at the blood flow dysfunction, what the studies have found is that there is a significantly higher rate of chronic blood insufficiency that's been found in Meniere's in the veins of the head and neck. And certainly I know with some clients I've had, there have definitely been those head and neck issues, stiffness, there might have been in the neck or neck pain. But also what's come out in the research recently is the blood perilymph barrier dysfunction. So the blood barrier actually between the blood capillaries and the perilymph, which is critical for this composition, this sodium and potassium composition, is actually breaking down, and there's a change in the blood vessel walls. This is leading to permeability, so increasing of this ion transport from the blood into the perilymph. And this barrier dysfunction may be one of the primary causes of Meniere's. And I've put at the bottom, is there a bacterial link? Because there may well be. When I was looking at the studies with this barrier breakdown, they actually used a molecule called lipopolysaccharides, LPS, to actually break down the barrier when they were conducting these studies. So LPS is known to break down the walls of the blood barrier and to stimulate an immune reaction. Now, LPS is actually found on the outside walls of many bacteria. So this is a way that any kind of bacterial infection may be impacting Meniere's disease by that impact on that barrier mechanism between the blood and the perilymph. So ion transport dysregulation, this is what's really coming out in most recent papers, is emerging as a really key aspect to do with it. So this endolymph balance, that inner fluid, is more dependent on your ion transport, the sodium, the potassium, rather than necessarily the fluid volume. And there are channels that for these sodium potassium to go through the membrane, so they're crucial to the regulation of this endolymphatic fluid. Potassium ions, and we said these are integral to electrical firing of nerves. But what we're seeing with this whole picture is that actually there's an elevation of an enzyme pump that pumps this potassium into the endolymph fluid in the cochlea. And what happens is you get an enhanced secretion of the endolymph. And what this does is you increase in fluid volume, but you also increase in potassium. Now, because potassium is needed for electrical firing of nerves, if you've got more and more and more potassium coming in, what you get is an increased nerve hyperexcitability, which can be tinnitus. So this is one of the mechanisms that tinnitus can have. You've got this hyperexcitability of nerve transmission that's going on. So this sound, constant sound that people have, is because of this excess nerve firing that's going on. There's also some hormonal dysregulation of the water channels as well, which is playing a role in the fluid movement changes. And again, there's a big stress element there that's linking in with the water balance hormone. So multiple studies have reported that there are pressure changes in the cochlea and the vestibular fluids. There's going to be muscle spasms as well. And these symptoms are thought to be caused by an excess accumulation of the endolymphs, that fluid buildup, causing a distension of the ducts. And that progressive distension damaging the thin membranes and potentially leading to rupture. So looking at stress hormones then can be a bit of a chicken and egg situation, both the cause and effect. So elevated stress and anxiety often accompany this whole vestibular dysfunction. But conversely, once you get these actual symptoms, they can activate the stress response itself. So these symptoms are so distressing and so overwhelming for many people that it brings on a lot of stress in itself, but the stress could actually precede it as well. The mechanisms are not fully understood with regard to the stress hormones in the inner ear. It can be directly via cortisol, which is your main stress hormone, on the actual ion channels and this brain nerve transmission, but it could also be indirectly via stress-related substances such as histamine. So we've already seen that histamine is a big player in this. There's a lot of inflammation, and if you go to your doctor, they're probably going to give you an antihistamine. Histamine is released when there's a lot of stress going on. It's an inflammatory molecule. So again, just tying it into the stress aspect. So just looking at some of the pre-stress hormones involved, adrenaline, which is now also called epinephrine, that increases potassium secretion in the cochlea. So you've seen that potassium causes this hyper-excitability if there's too much in there. So if you've got a lot of stress that's going on, it's increasing more of this potassium into that inner fluid, which is causing more nerve hyper-excitability, more tinnitus. It's also increasing another hormone, a water balance hormone called ADH, antidiuretic hormone, which we're going to look at in the next slide. And with cortisol, your main stress hormone, that there are high serum cortisol levels that have been found in Meniere's. The longer the duration, the higher the cortisol level. So that's no surprise, because the longer you've had it, the greater stress that you will be under. So the more stress hormones that will instigate. Cortisol actually acts as an anti-inflammatory and an immune suppressive. And so for many people, steroids have actually been used for many years for the anti-inflammatory and immune suppressive effects. But this therapy for the inner ear is poorly understood. For some, though, it can be helpful, but it's not the whole picture. There's also another hormonal system called the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, or RAS, and this also stimulates your water balance hormone. So you've got a double whammy here of this water balance hormone being stimulated. So let's have a look at it. It's called antidiuretic hormone, or also known as vasopressin, just to confuse you. And what has been found that during a Meniere's attack, there is a significant increase in this particular hormone. So what does it do? It regulates water and also salt or iron. So we're back to sodium, potassium. It increases the blood water volume through constricting blood vessels. Here we go, we've got a cardiovascular element to it. It helps increase sodium levels and water reabsorption, and it can reduce urine output as well. So when is it released? So if your blood levels are high in solutes or high in these ions, if you have reduced water volume, so if you're dehydrated, if you've got any stress hormone activation, then it's going to be activated. Negative emotional state. So here we're touching on mindset. You know, is the pain, is the anger, irritation, overwhelm. Any of these negative emotional states can have an impact of inducing the stress response and also this water balance hormone. And then infections of any kind as well will also have this effect of inducing this hormone. So allergies or intolerances, this is a big part of the picture. So looking at studies confirmed and suspected, what the figures are showing that for 60% of people with this condition, there's some type of airborne allergy, and for 40% there's a food allergy intolerance. There could be food and airborne, and that's highly likely. For the food intolerances, multiple studies have found wheat is the most common food allergen at 68%. But also as well, high levels of gluten, particularly gliadin sensitivity, has also been found. Plus as well, there will be individual reactivities as well, how someone's able to detox, what their gut conditions are like, because your gut terrain very much influences on how you tolerate any food. So it's not just a food per se, but also what's going on in your gut as well. So with inhalant allergies, there have been found to be changes in the cochlear fluid following an allergy challenge. And allergies and intolerances activate the immune system and create inflammation, which affects the whole of the body. So autoimmunity can be part of the picture as well, and these are the proposed autoimmune mechanisms in Meniere's itself, centering around that endolymphatic sac. That's the potential target of allergic reaction via connected blood vessels. So what can happen is via those blood vessels into the endolymphatic sac, there can be entry of a toxin, a foreign substance, a virus, a food immune complex, an antibody, histamine, an immune memory cell from reactivation of childhood infections and viruses. This is really interesting because this has shown to be part of the picture as well, which we're going to look at. So what can happen if these things get into that endolymphatic sac? It stimulates the immune in the connective tissue surrounding it, causing inflammation and reducing the sac's filtering capability. So remember, this endolymphatic sac is all about fluid regulation, filtering out excess fluid. And what this can do is it can result in toxic accumulation of metabolic products and inflammation that interferes with hair cell function. So viruses and hearing loss, this is an interesting one because it has been recognized for some time that hearing loss can be caused by viruses. So I've known this since a child, and this is where my interest stems in Meniere's disease. My father is partially deaf, and he lost his hearing through the measles virus. My sister had the measles vaccination, and she also became deaf on high pitches with the measles vaccine. So I've known since a child that viruses can cause hearing loss, and there's clearly some kind of genetic susceptibility in my family, which is one of the reasons I've been working with John as well, because it has a personal resonance. Because people with hearing loss or Meniere's disease, it doesn't just impact them, it impacts their family, the people around them as well. So what these viruses do? Well, it directly damages the inner ear structure, and it can induce inflammatory responses, which then causes the damage, or it increases susceptibility to bacterial or fungal infections. And all three can play a part in this picture. Now, here's some specific viruses that have been found to be involved in the Meniere's picture. Cytomegalovirus, measles, so that's been my experience with my father, the measles virus, German measles, HIV, herpes simplex, that's the one where you get the cold sores, variola zoster, which is chickenpox, shingles, mumps, West Nile, Epstein-Barr, which is glandular fever. The herpes virus family in particular has been found to be involved with Meniere's predominantly. So the cytomegalovirus, herpes simplex, variola zoster, and the Epstein-Barr. And actually with the herpes simplex has been found in the inner ear of 75% of Meniere's people. And what we're now seeing is a reactivation of childhood viruses. Now, this is interesting because we're also seeing the same picture with COVID as well. And I think there's an element of the immune system going down, which is allowing this reactivation of childhood viruses. And with one of my Meniere's clients, when we did a viral panel, that actually what we found was that he had a reactivation of all the herpes family viruses, which are the main viruses that do affect Meniere's sufferers. And this reactivation of viruses may represent the development of the bilateral aspect of Meniere's, which occurs in around about 15 to 50% of the condition, because this reactivation can cause toxicity that damages the nerve endings in the inner ear. But it does depend on the viral load in there, and it will depend on the person's ability to be able to clear any toxicity and viral load from the body. So antiviral drugs have been found to help some people where the symptom duration is 2 years or less. And that would suggest to me that where there is some kind of active or reactivation of a virus that's going on there. But we're now also seeing these viral fungal co-infections. So this is becoming quite prevalent. And over the last couple of years, ever since the pandemic, the whole fungal, the mold picture has absolutely exploded and gone through the roof. And there's very few of my clients now who are not testing positive to mold mycotoxins. Many reasons for that, but one of them that could be that the immune system is just going down with what's been happening over the past few years. So with regards to the relationship between viruses and fungal infections, where there is a viral infection, again, it can lower the immune response. So an opportunistic fungal infection can then take hold. And if there is this co-infection of a fungus, then this can complicate the viral infection. And the primary viruses so far are the flu and COVID. And we are seeing a big picture with COVID for those people who do have any kind of mold or fungal infection having much worse outcomes. And with every one of my clients, this is really interesting when I started to really look at the mold picture. They've either tested positive to mold mycotoxins, or in some of the screening questionnaires or tests that I've done, flagged up as this is a potential. So I do think this is part of the picture and something that needs to be investigated. And with Meniere's, there's definitely a subset of people that are affected by this mold, primarily Aspergillus and penicillin, plus Candida, which is a yeast. And when we look at Frances's case history, we'll see that when we did a mold mycotoxin, she actually did have very high levels of a particular Aspergillus called ochratoxin A. And when we looked at her case history, she had a history of yeast infections from Candida to other yeast overgrowths. So with any kind of fungal infection, it can trigger autoimmunity. So the whole mold picture can affect absolutely anywhere in your body. It's highly, highly toxic. And it can trigger an autoimmune attack in the inner ear for some people. Often there can be other autoimmune comorbidities, such as rheumatoid arthritis or another autoimmune condition. Now, this was really interesting when I really looked into the research, because with Aspergillus, it has actually been shown to upregulate a specific immune molecule that is linked to hearing loss. And what we're seeing is this subset of Meniere's people who are having this problem with this Aspergillus mold. And now we're seeing that it's involving an immune molecule that actually is linked to hearing loss. But what we're also seeing is some kind of cross-reactivity going on between mold and cochlin, which is a protein in the inner ear. Heavy metals. Again, this is part of the picture. Common heavy metals can be mercury, arsenic, cadmium, nickel, lead, aluminium. These are often present in low levels in the environment, but actually they can be in high levels in certain cases. And high levels can be toxic to the body. Heavy metals are shown to cause hearing loss, causing damage to the hair cells and the auditory nerves. I think we need a lot more research in this area, because this is really coming up now, flagging up. There's a lot more heavy metals in the environment now. We're exposed to them in the air, in food, in the water that we drink. So I think this is part of the picture. And again, with one of my Meniere's clients, I did a heavy metals test with him, and he was found to have high levels of mercury, arsenic, and also nickel as well. So it is part of the picture. And I want to just look at mercury dental fillings. This I pulled off of the website of the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, because low levels of mercury vapor is found to be released from fillings. And when it's released, 80% of that is absorbed by lungs and passed to the rest of the body, especially the brains, the kidneys, the liver, the lungs, and the GI tract. So going to your elimination organs. So it accumulates in body fluids and tissues and can stay in the brain for decades. And this website actually lists hearing loss as a common symptom associated with inhaling this mercury vapor. So it's part of the picture. So going on to the oral health then. So we're seeing there's a big issue with oral health. This poor oral health is linked with this increase of Meniere's, especially where there's periodontitis and missing teeth. Periodontitis is when there's inflammation in the gums, or there might be bleeding that's going on there, where bacteria and other infections can get actually into the bloodstream. There is a link that's been found as well with TMJ or TMD. This is the temporomandibular joint dysfunction. So around the joints here, you can get inflammation and not being able to eat properly and being quite painful. The symptoms are very linked to, it's very similar to Meniere's. And there's a clear association here with Meniere's and TMG, but also cervical spine disorder. And that may well play into that cerebral spinal fluid that we looked at that's connected to the perilymph as well. So potential causes here are trauma, teeth grinding, wear and tear, degenerative joints, such as osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, bacterial infections, arthritis, heavy metals. And what we're seeing is a direct proportional relationship found between jaw dysfunction and heavy metals, including mercury from dental amalgam. So genetics, there's no specific genes that are yet identified with Meniere's per se. There are probably several genes that play a part in susceptibility. This predisposition just provides susceptibility. It's usually environmental factors that are most important in inducing disease symptoms by switching on the genes. But what I did find as well, there's an interesting gene association that is now starting to emerge with this HLA genotype. HLA stands for human leukocyte antigen. It's responsible for the immune response. But this particular one, HLA-C gene, is now being linked with Meniere's disease, and this could be a potential genetic predisposition. And again, we need more research on what actually is happening, and I think we'll probably find that over the next few years. But what I wanted to highlight here with this particular genotype is there is a strong association with the HLA genotype where there's a mutation with autoimmune conditions. There can be specific mutations as well that impairs the ability to detox mold mycotoxins. And that happens with about 25% of the population. There's another mutation in this genotype for celiac disease or gluten allergy or intolerance. And again, there is this gluten link that's going on. And we're seeing worse outcomes with COVID. And with COVID, there's a big tinnitus link as well. So we're seeing that flaring up as well. Also, as well, what I pulled up as well is there's some mutations that have been found in detoxification genes. So your ability to get rid of your wastes and your toxins. In particular, there have been 12 specific mutations that have been found in Meniere's disease in relation to a pathway called methylation. Methylation is involved in numerous things, but particularly in detoxification, and that is not working effectively as it should. There's also been another gene issue found with an enzyme called glutathione, which is your main intracellular antioxidants for dealing with inflammation. And there's gene deletions that have been found in relation to Meniere's that predisposes to hearing loss. And this actual enzyme is found in the cochlea itself, so very important to hearing. So there are genetic aspects, although not one per se that has definitely being found in relation to Meniere's disease. But I think as we go further down the line, I think more and more of the genetic side will come to the fore. We'll learn more about what's going on there. So nutrients I want to look at. Magnesium is my number one nutrient for almost anything because it is so fundamental to energy production, and everything in your body requires energy, including your inner ear and your immune responses. When you eat food, it is converted in your body into an energy molecule called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. Magnesium is essential to its function because it attaches to the molecule to actually activate it. And so metabolic disorders are a big part of Meniere's, and again linked to hearing loss, and magnesium is central to this. Magnesium also activates a pump that controls the sodium potassium electrical balance. Magnesium deficiency can be prevalent in the population. It often decreases with stress and when there's an activated immune system response, because it's very much needed for energy. And blood magnesium levels are correlated with what's found in the perilymph. Supplementation has been found to reduce hearing loss, vertigo, dizziness, headaches, migraines, and vestibular damage. Vitamin C, this is a brilliant natural antihistamine, which histamine is produced in response to allergens. It decreases inflammation, swelling, and symptoms of allergic reactions. It acts differently from medication, from the likes of the beta-histidine, in that it reduces the amount of histamine produced rather than blocking the receptors, which is what beta-histidine does. With around about 2 grams of vitamin C, histamine has been found to be reduced by around about 38%. I get food intolerances which manifest as pains in my joints, histamine pains in my joints. I take around about 1 gram of vitamin C and the pain comes down within about 15 minutes. So I find it hugely helpful for reducing a histamine response. Vitamin C also restores your stress response, so it works synergistically with stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. And it's got an anti-inflammatory component to it as well. There's a big oxidative stress role in Meniere's. Oxidative stress means essentially when you burn your fuel for energy, you get some byproducts which are quite reactive called free radicals, and they can cause damage in your body unless they are neutralized. And it's antioxidants such as glutathione that can do it, but also vitamin C as well. If these reactive molecules are not neutralized, then you can get this hyperactivity in nerve transmission, again, leading to tinnitus. And what this Japanese study found an improvement with vertigo, tinnitus, and hearing loss with just 600 milligrams per day for 8 weeks. Vitamin D, this is a key immune modulator in ear disorders, huge role in immune mucosal defenses, very much linked to allergic disorders of all kinds, as well as vertigo, autoimmunity, respiratory tract infections. And diversely affects as well lymphatic flow, which is your waste disposal system as well. And your nasal passages are very rich in this lymph as well. And interestingly, this disturbed lymphatic flow negatively affects muscle physiology. So again, back to TMJ and lockjaw around your jaw joint here as well. If you're not having the proper waste disposal system movement there, then it can affect your muscles that are affecting with your jaw movement. So anyone with TMJ should get their vitamin D levels tested. And with Meniere's disease, it has been found to be significantly lower than for control groups. 95% of your vitamin D levels are acquired through sunlight, so getting outside. Zinc, this is a really interesting point. The inner ear contains the highest zinc levels of the body, which means zinc is very much needed for inner ear function. Deficiency has been found in balance disorders, in tinnitus, and in hearing loss. It does protect the hair cells against toxins and these free radicals, and it's critical in anti-inflammatory pathways as well. It also reduces histamine levels, so we looked at as a big part of the picture. Stress really significantly lowers the zinc levels. Iron, this can play a part as well. Iron deficiency anemia associated with hearing loss and early Meniere's. This was part of the picture for Frances, our case history. And when we put some iron supplements in, then she started getting some hearing back. So this was a really interesting aspect for her. And iron supplementation has been found to resolve hearing loss where there is iron deficiency. And complete recovery from sudden hearing loss is found to be significantly more difficult where there is low blood iron levels. Iron is really important for this oxygen transport because it's found inside red blood cells. It's what oxygen attaches to, it's the actual iron molecule itself. And the inner ear really needs this high blood oxygen for proper function. It's also needed for energy production inside of yourself, for nerve function, immunity, and also detoxification. And then I just want to bring up this methylation pathway again that we discussed in the genetics, because another thing that methylation is involved in is metabolizing homocysteine. This is an intermediary molecule that you may have heard of in relation to cardiovascular disease. So if your homocysteine level goes high, you're more at risk from stroke or other cardiovascular conditions. And it has now emerging as a central role in hearing loss via this impaired methylation and sulfation as well, which is a pathway that links in with this methylation. So nutrients involved in this are vitamins B12 and folic acid, vitamins B6, iron and molybdenum. And what we're seeing is B12 and folic acid deficiency linked with hearing dysfunction. I do see a lot of disturbances to B12 with many clients. And B12 deficiency has been linked to tinnitus and reduced sensory and motor nerve functions. Omega-3 fats can help as well because these can really help reduce the homocysteine levels. They've also been found to reduce hearing loss. And these could be a good promising treatment for Meniere's based on modulating the systemic blood changes. Other nutrients involved ginkgo biloba, helps with circulation. Ginger is an anti-inflammatory to do with vertigo and dizziness, can really help in nausea. CoQ10 is another one as well that can really help improve vertigo, tinnitus, and Meniere's symptoms. And vitamin B3, nicotinic acid, and choline to do with nerve transmission. So yeah, this is an interesting one that's come out, that particular receptors in the neuromuscular junction are being affected. And these receptors are found to play a role in hearing disorders. And this really kind of links in with COVID as well, because we're finding the same receptors are actually being affected in COVID or being attacked in COVID. So vitamin B3 is found to be helpful, which is nicotinic acid, and B2 as well. Both levels reduced are associated with tinnitus. And both of these are very important in energy production. So the whole hearing balance mechanism very requires a lot of energy. So I want to just look at Frances, the case history that we did last year. It was supposed to be over 6 months, but it did last a little bit longer because she got COVID halfway through. So she came to me with Meniere's disease and vertigo, which she'd had for about 1.5 years. She had hearing loss in one ear, which fluctuated. She had vertigo attacks. Tinnitus was ringing for most days and often came with the vertigo attacks as well. There was fatigue and foggy headedness, as though she was about to start a cold. There was a floaty boat sensation and gut function symptoms, bloating, pain, swelling, winds, IBS type symptoms. She was on beta-histine and antihistamine. Her health history, she had gut problems, candida, repeated thrush attacks, PCOS, and bone spurs. PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and one of the key issues there is insulin resistance. So again, a metabolic issue, cardiovascular issue going on there. And prior to the onset of the symptoms, she moved house 1.5 years before that. She'd had a hip hop around the time of the move. She'd moved into an old house, so there was lots of DIY renovating that she needed to do, and she did that. And she thought there was mold that was probably likely in the house as well. We did some testing. They weren't all done at the same time. We started off with a mold questionnaire. So there was a high score indicating that mold toxicity was likely. We also did a pyroluria questionnaire. This is a metabolic condition where you can end up with chronic deficiencies of zinc and vitamin B6. And I see this a lot when there is a mold picture. And again, she had a high score there indicating this was likely. You can actually do a urine test for this, but I didn't because I've done so many of them that when they get such a high score, then usually that's a very good indication that pyroluria is present. We did some standard GP blood tests, which I then reanalyzed from the functional medicine perspective, whereby I narrowed down the reference range to reveal any imbalances. So there were several imbalances that were found, including potential pathogens. There were very low iron levels, and there were indications of low zinc, B12, B6, and also vitamin C. We did a food intolerance test, which was positive for multiple foods, including dairy, gluten, the gliadin part. So they were playing into that genetic predisposition, and high sulfur foods. And again, that would link in with the methylation cycle, which works together. We did a gut function test later on. It was actually quite good, the results of the gut function test. I think it would have been much, much worse had she'd done it right at the very beginning. But it did pick up low immune function, impaired gut barrier, some yeast, and some opportunistic bacteria. And then we lastly did a mold mycotoxin test, where she tested positive to 2 types of mycotoxin. Ochratoxin A, that's an aspergillus, of which this subset of Meniere's people do have a susceptibility to, and also citrin. So we did 6 health plans over the course of that time period. I always look at perspective from diet, lifestyle, testing, and supplements. We started off by looking at proper hydration, fluid intake, looking at the electrolytes. So these are your ions, and making sure that they were balanced for electrical balance. Looking at tea and coffee, switching into herbal teas for herbal remedies, and coffee, reducing the caffeine intake, but also as well switching onto a brand that's free of mycotoxins, because coffee beans can be very high in mycotoxins. We started off balancing blood sugar with food regularity and timings, looking at proteins, and starting to reduce these high histamine foods, so take down some of the inflammation. We started to address sleep, stress, and we brought in some Epsom salt baths. So Epsom salts are actually magnesium sulfate, and they can be absorbed directly through the skin. Sulfate is in the form that the body uses. So when there is issues with methylation sulfation, sometimes the body can't metabolize sulfur foods down into this sulfate problem, into this sulfate molecule the body needs. So this can really help with detoxification through the skin. It's also relaxing and bringing down the stress response. And at the beginning, we looked at standard bloods, food intolerances, and also visual contrast sensitivity tests, which Francis didn't actually do, but is a good one to do, because if you've got any environmental toxicity, it can affect the eyes. Supplements, we kept it simple with magnesium, vitamin B12, a B complex, DHA. It's a part of omega-3, but Francis's eyes were affected. So DHA is in high levels can really improve eyesight. So I use omega-3 in DHA form. Vitamin C, molybdenum for the sulfation pathway, turmeric for anti-inflammatories, and bitters and ginger to start to work on the detoxification channels in her liver. Moving on to plan 2, what we looked at is we continued the blood sugar balancing with complex carbohydrates. We increased high iron foods because the levels were very low, and we started to reduce or remove specific foods that were highlighted in the food intolerance test, including some of the sulfur foods as well. We started looking at reducing the toxic chemical exposure via food and water, because these can all have a toxicity impact on the inner ear. We started looking at deep breathing to increase the oxygenation. You need a lot of oxygen in the inner ear, and steam inhalation with essential oils. And we use eucalyptus there. So this is a really simple home remedy that you could all do. A bowl of hot water, you put in some eucalyptus essential oil, put your head over the bowl, a towel over your head, and just inhale for about 10 minutes. Eucalyptus is brilliant. It's antimicrobial, so it's really good for clearing all your facial passages, but also your lungs as well. We didn't do any more testing because we're addressing what we found. We put in some additional supplements of iron, ginkgo, and green barley grass, which is a pH balancer and a detoxifier. When we put in iron, this was interesting because within a week, she started getting some hearing or some noise back in that ear where she had the hearing loss. Moving on to plan 3, what we started to look at then, and so all these plans are all just building on each other. So we make some changes, and then you get used to them, and then you build on the next, and you just keep introducing changes to what you can manage to become part of your whole lifestyle. So omega-3 foods we looked at, and healthy fats, and then we looked at some foods that were supportive of the liver and the bile, so just to improve detoxification and get rid of some of those toxins. We started to look at oral hygiene here, so looking at the mouth, so that big impact on the mouth, the hearing, and we're looking at reducing some toxins, chemical exposure from the air and on the skin. We started to do some nervous system rebalancing to get some electrical balance back and some calming of the nervous system. And we used a sound therapy track here. This was a brilliant one that I found that was actually devised for tinnitus. So yeah, we all have this electrical component to our body, and set to a specific frequency, it helps with the tinnitus and just rebalance it, and that electrical hyper excitability that is going on in the brain. So gut function test was recommended at this stage. At this point, we removed the B12 because the levels should be on for a while, so levels would be replete, and the turmeric. And we put in an immune multi and Espelade. So on her gut function test, it was found that she had low secretory IgA levels, which is to an immune molecule, and Espelade can help relase, just increase those. Moving on to plan 4. So really expanding a diet out now in looking at rainbow diet and polyphenols. Polyphenols are your blue, black, purple foods, really good nutrients for helping rebalancing the gut microflora because they feed the good bacteria. And we started looking at juicing to help with the detoxification organs, the liver and the kidneys, and to get back on track with some of the early recommendations where she hadn't been able to continue with them because of the COVID. So it was around about plan 3 and 4 where Frances had COVID really badly for about 2 months. So we had to really pull back on what we were doing and just help her through this period before we could push on again with that. Lifestyle, we looked at some additional stress strategies, and looking at reducing electromagnetic frequency exposure. So these are the frequencies you're going to get from electronic devices, laptops, phones, and so forth. They give out positive charge. They can really imbalance the electrical conductivity in the body. And with Meniere's, there's already electrical imbalance, so that can be problematic. So looking at strategies to reduce that. Supplements, we paired them right back this time just to magnesium, vitamin C, D, H, A, and molybdenum. And then moving on to plan 5, we then moved on to look at binding and eliminate toxins with specific foods, including high zinc foods, and we looked at some detox strategies as well. We revisited the oral hygiene, again, to kind of really dial that in, and the Epsom salt baths. And we did some specific exercises to help with gallbladder movement. You can get some stasis in the liver gallbladder, so just make sure that flows, because that's where some of your toxins will come out. And then we looked at movement and how she was incorporating movement into her life. Supplements, again, it was quite dialed back. We had iron in as well. D-ribose, that's part of the energy molecule, the ATP, so it can significantly raise your energy levels. And NAC, which is N-acetylcysteine, which is the precursor to glutathione on your main cellular antioxidant. And then moving into plan 6, we're looking at gut repair nutrients and high vitamin A foods. Vitamin A vital to immune function, but also your gut wall barrier. And then we're bringing in a little bit of intermittent fasting with time restricted eating. One of the reasons for that is when you do that, it helps your body with the repair and renewal aspects of the cells, clearing out damaged or infected cells and allowing the body time to replace them with new cells. And we started looking at things to help with cleaning the colon and also gently bringing some antifungals. We revisited the steam inhalation with eucalyptus. Francis was open to do a little bit of EFT tapping, which is just tapping on acupuncture points, which can help for some people. And we looked at some mindset patterns, so bringing in any kind of negative programming or thought patterns that was holding her back. We revisited bloods and we did a mold mycotoxin test. Ideally, I'd like to have done that earlier, but because of the COVID, we never had the opportunity to do it. So we kind of got to the end of the 6-month or the 6-plan trial period and only did it then. So we're not quite finished with Francis because we still have a lot of mycotoxins to clear. But the supplements, what we did in the last plan of the trial, we were reintroducing supplements because she did have this COVID infection of molybdenum, the immune multi, the Espelade, L-glutamine, and a toxin binder, which was a zeolite one. So this is the end of the trial, and I got Francis to do some self-reported trial scores throughout the currency of the trial. It was on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very bad and 10 being very good, and we focus in on the Meniere symptoms. So starting off with the hearing loss in her right ear, at the start of the trial, she rated her hearing loss being 1 at 8 worst up to about 4. And at the end, then it's doubled. She's about an 8 or 9. The tinnitus, vertigo, and also the ear pressure all completely resolved itself by the end of the trial. Her energy levels doubled. Her sleep was so much better, again, doubled, and the stress level had significantly reduced. So brilliant scores from Francis. And Francis has finally given us a great testimonial. She says, today I'm living a relatively symptom-free life, thanks to John Ingram from Deaf to Meniere's charity for giving me this opportunity and introducing me to the amazing Jan. Life was previously not good and doctors and meds weren't helping, but following Jan's guidance and taking her recommended supplements, I'm enjoying life again. 6 months ago, I spent most of my days in bed, unable to do much, but now I'm back to spinning classes. I even wear my noise cancelling headphones in the class as it's very loud. I'm feeling and living a happier, healthier life, and my Meniere symptoms are quiet. Shh, don't wake them up. I'm enjoying being me again. I hope this inspires someone else to look for alternative health. And Francis has kindly posted a great video testimonial, which I thought you might all like to hear. So I'm just going to stop sharing my slides and I'm going to then share the video.
So I just wanted to do a little video for Jan. A massive thank you for all your help and continued support. I will continue working with you and our journey together. About a year ago, I was just beside myself, having regular vertigo attacks, not being able to get out of bed, not being able to drive my children to school. And I'd have days where I would just be in bed and I would sleep off an attack and then wake up and still have another attack and just would have the whole day in bed, not being able to shift them. No use from the doctors, no help from anywhere. I didn't really know where to turn. I was searching the internet for ideas and advice. I found John's group and started asking questions on the group, listening to what other people were saying and posting, and basically got hold of John, and John talked to me about Jan and offered me an opportunity to do a study with her. And I haven't looked back. It's been amazing. It's not hard to do. Jan sorts out all the supplements. It's a video call once a month, or, you know, once you've got going with your program, we talk about food. It's not about what I can't eat. It's about swapping things out and changing things over. And it's about making changes and decisions to help me and help myself. And by doing that and following Jan's advice, I've been symptom-free for over 6 months now. Occasionally I have a wobbly day where I just basically feel wobbly. But here I am, I'm skiing with my family, and I couldn't be happier. And I have had no attacks on the slopes, and I have no symptoms. I've taken all my supplements with me, and I follow, you know, the routine. I am able to have the drink now and again, as long as I'm careful. I avoid salts and too much of anything, and I just keep hydrated and follow the instructions of amazing Jan and her capabilities of turning my life around. So anybody who's interested, I really hope that this can help somebody else.
So thank you to Frances for that, which I thought was a lovely testimonial. So let me just share my screen back to my slides again. So what can you do now if you have the condition? Where do you start? So I just want to give you some simple recommendations to get you going. First of all, hydration, super important. Fluids and electrolytes. Remember, your electrolytes are those who are going to conduct your electrical activity. Fluid-wise, 1.5 litres per day, that's the size of a large bottle of water, is the minimum for an average sedentary person. The more you move, the hotter climate you're in, the more you sweat, the more that you'll need. But try and aim for that. The fluid can come from water, it can come from herbal teas or juices. Try and drink it throughout the day. Nature has provided electrolytes in food and drink form, so including more of those in your diet can help. Coconut water, that is nature's natural electrolyte. So that's something that you may want to bring in. A simple small glass of water each day can make a difference. If you're having salt, switch your white salt over to the pink Himalayan salt. Most white salt is just processed salt with sodium in only. The pink Himalayan salt is about the only salt left now in its natural form, which means it has all the electrolytes at very low levels. Foods like celery, cucumber, watermelon, kiwi fruit, citrus fruit, pineapple, bell peppers and carrots. These are all very high in electrolytes, so you might want to start to include these more in your diet. It doesn't have to be difficult. You could even put sliced cucumber or sliced citrus fruit into your water, so you can do it that way. So gluten, we do know, is a problem for many. So you may want to look at reducing or eliminating gluten-containing grains, which are wheat, rye, barley, and oats, and start to substitute those for some of the non-gluten grains, such as rice, quinoa, buckwheat, millet, and corn. Buckwheat is an easy one to substitute in. It can be found in most supermarkets now, in pasta, in cracker form, in noodles. Its consistency is similar to wheat, but it doesn't contain any gluten. It's not a wheat itself, so the name's a bit of a misnomer. So that's a simple one that you can do a switch. Just beware of the hidden gluten that can be found in processed foods, tin soup, sauces, etc. Get used to reading labels and looking for that hidden gluten. And then introduce a rainbow diet. Foods are generally categorized into color groups, such as the red, the orange, the yellow, the green, the blue, black, purple, and the white, tan, brown. So these color groups all have different levels of phytonutrients, plant nutrients in there. So one of the best ways of getting a whole range of them is to eat the rainbow every day. It doesn't have to be at every meal, but it can be over the course of the day. Let your eyes guide you. Try and go for a colourful diet and include one of these different colour groups throughout the course of the day. 3 key lifestyle recommendations: sunlight, get outdoors every day. So vitamin D was seen as super important for this condition. 95% comes from the sunlight. Midday is the best time for vitamin D creation in the skin. For those of us who live in the UK and other cold, dark northern countries in the winter, you probably won't be getting enough vitamin D because the sunlight is not strong enough at that time. Unless you're going to go away to a hot country and top your vitamin D levels, you will need a vitamin D supplement through the winter. During the day, during the summer, then you can get it all from outside. That said, still get outside even if you are taking a vitamin D supplement, because it will help to resync your body clock, which helps with, which governs everything from your metabolism to your sleep to your energy production. Oral health, you've seen how important oral health is. This is really simple things that you can do. Substitute your toothpaste, your regular one, and your mouthwash for aloe vera products. These can significantly help reduce the inflammation and help rebalancing your oral microbiome. So you have a microbiome in your mouth, just like you have in your gut itself. And so aloe vera is actually a polyphenol product, and it feeds the good microflora and helps with the rebalancing. Any dental problems, infections, cavities, get them addressed. If you've got those mercury fillings, then you may want to consider having them replaced. But do find a holistic dentist rather than just a regular dentist, someone who knows what they're doing. Maybe work with a nutritionist while you're doing it, because you will have some mercury release when you have those removed. An Epsom salt bath, getting into a weekly routine of doing that to help reduce stress and skin detoxification. If you haven't got a bath, you can do a foot bath. So just a simple bucket of hot water, put some Epsom salts in and soak your feet for around about 20 minutes. Supplements, magnesium, you're looking at maybe about 300 to 400 milligrams per day. Vitamin C, one of the supplements around 1,000 milligrams per day, and vitamin D at 1,000 IU or 25 micrograms. I've kept that level quite low. Some people may recommend higher, but vitamin D will definitely upregulate your immune system. But if you already have an imbalanced immune system, it can just exacerbate that balance. So I found a lower level much more tolerable when there's any kind of immune imbalance that's going on there. Good professional supplement brands that I use are Viridian, Cytoplan, BioCare, and Pure Encapsulations. I do use an online distributor for these brands that anyone who's not familiar with can use. And if you wanted to use them, you can use my discount code of JCL010 to get a 10% discount. Do be aware, though, if you are on medications, to check with your doctor before taking supplements, because there can be an interaction with medications. 3 key testing recommendations. If you can get a standard full set of GP blood tests, then that would be brilliant to see what might be going on. At the very least, looking at iron and ferritin, vitamins B12 and D, and folic acid. And also alkaline phosphatase, which is part of the liver profile. If it's below 70, it indicates a potential zinc deficiency. And again, look at your electrolytes, your sodium, potassium, bicarbonate and chloride, and check your blood glucose levels, either with glucose or HbA1c. Most of these are standard in the full set anyhow, so see if you can get that from your doctor. A visual sensitivity contrast test. This is a cheap online test that you can do for about $12. The link's in there. They can test for any mold or biotoxin illness. And a food intolerance test is definitely worthwhile doing to see if there are any potential food intolerances. And I put 3 labs on there that I use. And some of these labs as well will do environmental toxins as well. So in summary, just looking at the stress key points, if there is a lot of stress, then this is going to increase your nutrient requirements. Stress really impacts your whole digestive system, so it can reduce digestion and absorption. It can lead to unhealthy eating patterns. You're looking for more fuel, more energy, so high junk food, high fat food to take on energy to deal with the stressor. But it can also exceed to the breakdown rate of your cells exceeding repair rate, and you can often see this in musculoskeletal injuries. Key action points: change your diet, address your lifestyle, consider some basic tests, and consult an expert. And before we finish, I just want to quickly go over, if anyone is interested in working with me, I just briefly want to go through my programs with you. I have 2 programs, a 3-month one, which is the foundational one, and a 6-month one, which is the standard one. We did the standard one with Francis, so we've gone through that already. This is just an overview of what we would do. The foundational part will happen in the 6 months and the first 3 months, and then there's the second part where we take it up a notch. And the prices, if you do want to work with me, I'm offering a 10% discount for this masterclass with the code. These are the prices. There are 2 payment options. The full payment is slightly cheaper. For the 3 months, it's 454, monthly installments are 158. And for the 6-month program, it's £855 and £149. This masterclass has been about raising awareness rather than necessarily selling my services. But if you do want to work with me, then I do offer a 30 minutes free discovery call in the first instance where we can chat about your health conditions and how I can help you. And you can click on the link if you wanted to do that. We would love to hear your thoughts on how you found this masterclass, and we will send out after this event, we'll send out a short feedback form. So we'd love it if you could help fill that out about how you found the event. So thank you very much for listening. That's everything. I've kind of gone through it rather quickly because we did have quite a lot of content to get through. I just wanted to give you a really good overview of the topic and just how nutrition and lifestyle can really help with you all, because I think there needs to be some hope for you and your community, because right now you're just being told by your doctor that there's nothing that can be done. But we've seen from Francis, and we're seeing with some of the other clients, that there's a lot that can be done when you start addressing your symptoms from the nutrition and lifestyle perspective. So I know I've kind of gone on and I've overrun. We do have some chat, so I am just going to open this up to any questions before we finish.
So Jan, shall I read out what's in the chat so far?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a little bit of feedback from Katie about when you were talking about the progress scores with Francis, and she's just put, wow, what scores? This is fantastic. I agree. I'm a neurophysio, ex-NHS for 15 years. I wish this intervention was part of the standard NHS care for clients with Meniere.
Brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, as you can see, they were amazing. We're not yet finished with Francis because we did the mycotoxin test right at the very end, and she did have the high level of aspergillus. So Francis is continuing to work with me as we clear it. When you have mold, it can take quite a few months to clear it, but I would like to hope that we can get most of the scores up at even a little bit higher once we've cleared all the mycotoxins. But it was a brilliant result. And what I will say with most of my Meniere's clients is they've all improved massively in many parameters. So it's not just a one-off there. Okay, so Shirley, any more?
Next one from Janine. What is your opinion about using CBD oil for anti-inflammation, stress relief, and helping other symptoms?
I think the evidence on CBD oil is mixed. It's not something I would go to as a main to. For some people, it does help. For others, it doesn't. I think we need a lot more research on CBD oil. That doesn't mean it doesn't help. I just think that the evidence is mixed so far. And I think if you're using CBD oil, it needs to be part of a general supplement program.
Next question. If you can't swallow pills, how do you handle the supplements?
Oh, there are different varieties of supplements. It doesn't have to be in pill form. You can use powders or you can use liquids. Powders, I think, are easier to use, and you can definitely vary the dose much better with powder than you can do with capsules. Not everyone likes a powder. I find them quite easy, but for those who can't swallow pills, that's one way of using it. Just use a powdered supplement. Okay.
Okay, next one. I read on Meniere's consumer website that using vitamin B6 to reduce tinnitus and vertigo. About using vitamin B6. I tried it and both stopped in 10 days. Apparently others have had the same response. My case was not severe, but some others were.
Yeah, you have to be careful when you're introducing supplements, and particularly if you're using B6 in its active form, which is P5P. I never bring it in right at the very beginning, because what it's going to do, it's going to massively upregulate detoxification. And what you find with this condition is there's a lot of toxicity. Often the elimination pathways are not fully cleared or not working properly. So when you start to upregulate detoxification, you're mobilizing toxins from stores, but you can't necessarily get them out through your detox channels of your liver, your kidneys, and your colon. So when I'm working on a program, I start to work on clearing the channels at the same time. So I don't bring in B6 at the beginning, and when I do bring it in, I might only bring it in one capsule per week to see how someone responds. The same is with zinc as well. Be aware that zinc can do the same, and I never bring in zinc at the beginning as well for the same reason. So although I'm giving you all this information on supplements, it's more of an art as to how you bring them in, because everyone will respond in different ways to supplements.
Okay, next one. Does the liposomal delivery of some supplements really make much of a difference compared to standard supplements?
That's a very interesting question, because the evidence does suggest that it can make a difference, and I've tried both forms. Liposomal vitamin C is actually very expensive, but I find vitamin C, even in the cheapest form, works really well. So vitamin C is not something I would use as a liposomal one, particularly because of the cost expense to it. Liposomal, though, sometimes can be much better when you're looking at a fat soluble vitamin, such as maybe CoQ10 is a good one to have in the liposomal form, or maybe vitamin E. Vitamin D is usually okay without liposomal. But generally, when you're looking at a cost balance with vitamin C, I wouldn't bring in liposomal. I'll just use regular vitamin C.
Okay, there aren't any other questions at the moment.
Brilliant. So that's great. So thank you all for everyone. That's it all finished now.
One more just popped in.
Okay.
Jan?
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I got cut off in my introduction. The only bit I missed out really was a huge thank you to Jan for the massive amount of work she's freely volunteered to put this presentation together. It's really been a Herculean effort and a fantastic amount of information. And I think the one message from me, which in my health journey, which you'll see very clearly from this, is there is no silver bullet to fix Meniere's disease. It's a complex, coordinated set of different things that you need to address and get yourself healthy again. But anyway, thanks very much, Jan, for that fantastic presentation. It's amazing.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm just sorry I raced through it quite quickly. I do hope that I have raised the awareness, which is what this was all about. Say the video recordings were going out to those people who have registered, but also crucially as well, John will be uploading the video and the slides onto his website. And this is part of the whole awareness that we wanted to raise for people, so that there is an option that you can look at when you are looking at Meniere's disease, that it's not just about symptom management. And there's one more question I've just seen. Does flying affect Meniere's? It could well do, because there's going to be pressure changes in the ear, and we know that pressure changes can affect it. So yes, it could potentially affect it. Yeah.
Jan, there's one more that popped in just above. Can you speak to the lack of awareness and acceptance by the general medical community, and specifically ENT doctors, regarding the kind of treatments you prescribe?
Yeah, we see this generally with any kind of chronic condition where nutrition and lifestyle is not generally recognized as being helpful for any chronic condition, let alone Meniere's disease. There are not many nutrition practitioners doing Meniere's disease, so there isn't that much awareness of what we do. I use a functional medicine approach, which is well known to help many chronic conditions. But again, we're certainly here in the UK, there's not that awareness of what we actually do with functional medicine. There's more of an awareness in the US rather in the UK. So I think generally here, GPs will probably pay a little bit of lip service and just say, give it a go. If it helps, it helps. But they won't generally recommend it at all, which is a shame. And I think this is part of what I wanted to do with this webinar, is to really raise the awareness of what we do for nutrition practitioners that follow this kind of mechanism and look at working with the body, because that's what we're doing. We're looking at system rebalancing as opposed to just eat this or just eat that. It's about looking at the systems and rebalancing the systems, because this picture is very multifactorial. And I think it's why there's been so many mixed results for many people. And even when you look at the research, there is a huge amount of research actually on Meniere's, but all in different spaces, and nothing has been linked together and pulled together in this kind of way. And how do these all kind of interlink together? And I hope this is the start now for more awareness for Meniere's, and just how natural health or natural healing can really work with this condition.
Okay, 2 more quick questions, but I think should we have these as the last ones, Jan? Yeah. So no, please, no more questions after this. So first one, what type of weather should we be aware of affecting or triggering Meniere's?
I'd say weather changes generally, because weather change, any kind of weather changes, extreme weather changes are going to cause a bit of stress in the body for sure. So, and certainly in the UK, we get lots of extreme changes, but usually I would say seasonal changes are the most, when you're going into different seasons, can affect it. But when you look at it from the whole kind of the whole kind of wider perspective, and you look at it from actually upregulating your immune system, protecting yourself in that way, eating the right foods, taking some supplements to balance yourself, then generally what will happen is, as you go through the season changes and the weather changes, you won't notice the effects as much.
Last question, and it's a thank you to you, but also how can we continue to follow your research? Are you on social media?
Yes, I'm on social media, but when you signed up to this, there's also a box that you had to tick about mailing lists. So I do a monthly newsletter. So you'll all be on my monthly newsletter that if you want to you can always unsubscribe, but I will keep you up to date with all the information that I do there. And then you can keep in touch with me that way. But yes, social media, you can find me. I have a Facebook page, which is under Boundless Energy Nutrition. And I have an Instagram page, which is under my name, Jan Clementson. So you can follow me that way as well. So there are numerous ways to follow me. So I think that's the last questions. We got through in the 90 minutes, which was great. Thank you all so much for listening. For those of you with Meniere's disease, I wish you well on your health journey. And I just want you to know that there are things that you can do to improve your symptoms. And that is it. Let's say the recording will come out and the slides will come out at the beginning of next week to all those who want them.
Thank you so much.